Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Quiddity Property Education Season 5. I got some great guests lined up for you, and I hope that you will enjoy listening to their experiences, their knowledge, and how they're finding title splitting as well as property investment in the UK in 2026. Let's dive in. So, today I'm delighted to be joined by Michael, the brains behind Property Data, a software analytics system that I've been using myself for the last 8 years. Mentees of mine, as well as other investors, are big in using that platform to be able to understand what they're buying, curate, and also assess their property investment. Let's take a look at what Michael has to say about the system itself, but also more importantly, some of the quirks around it and how we can all benefit by having access to such a system. We're going to talk about Michael, the company, why I've paid now for almost coming up to 8 years for this platform, and really how am I using it on the day-to-day with my mentees. They also get a recommendation, so I'm sure Michael can speak about these. But the idea is, how is it fixing our problem as property investors, and also more importantly, the shortcut it provides, which I think what property data does for us. So before we go into that, Michael, so can I ask you, in terms of as an intro, maybe a short intro to yourself. We've already done a kind of an introduction on another video that will introduce this, but in a minute roundup. So who are you? How long have you been doing this? And where did this idea come from?
Yeah, for sure. So I started Property Data. It's coming up to 9 years ago. So it's 2017.
Might be one of your first customers then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
We always like a long-standing customer. So it's about 9 years ago. So before that, I'd been involved with setting up something called What Three Words, which is an addressing system in that kind of maps the whole world at 57 trillion squares.
Wow.
So I was one of the co-founders of that, and so that was my sort of back experience before in what is very sort of exotically called GIS, Geographic Information Systems, which technically What Three Words and Property Data both are. So that's the sort of thread. Okay. But 9 years ago I started Property Data, and the sort of light bulb moment, if you like, is I was watching a friend. He decided to do a buy to let, right? So he was going to buy a buy to let in London, North London somewhere. Yeah. And he was a sort of analytical guy, so he was creating this spreadsheet of comparables for the kind of property he wanted to buy in a certain area, and he was writing down, this property sold for this amount and the square footage was this. So then a little Excel formula to calculate price per square foot. And I thought, well, it's quite clever that, but it's a bit risky this, because what if he types the wrong number on his, you have a fat fingers moment on your keyboard, you type the wrong number, it throws your calculation, you get, and you end up, you might end up making a £10,000 mistake or £50,000 mistake in London. So I thought, this is, with my software development mindset, I thought, this is not there must be a better way of doing this. Yes. And I couldn't really find one, so I decided to make one. So that was the kind of core, the very first. She just built it in 3 weeks, nine years ago. Wow. The very first version. And what it basically did, you say, I'm interested in investing in this area, and it would go off to Zoopla at the time, and suck in all the properties on market. Work out what the average asking price for a 2-bed flat was, work out what the average price per square foot was, and present that on a little dashboard. So that was the very first version 1, and I got a sort of last minute stall at the Property Investor Show in the XL East London, and sort of it was kind of funny because everyone has, I don't know if you've ever been to trade shows like that, but everyone has very glamorous sort of stalls with like these models of their skyscrapers or whatever it is they're trying to sell you. Yeah. And I went along, didn't pay for anything, so I just left a shell. You're supposed to sort of fit out your still. I had the shell, so it was just a black felt backdrop, and I bought a table and an iMac and just started giving demos of this thing that I built in 3 weeks. And people loved it. And the funny thing was, people were so, I was really attracted to your stand because it looked so rubbish that I thought, well, there must be some substance here. The product must actually be good because the stand looks so rubbish. Whereas, you've always got to be a bit suspicious. The more sort of swanky the stand, the more maybe they're trying to sell you something.
They're hiding some stuff. Yes.
So that was a sort of an accidental success. But so people liked it. People started signing up. and it was great. Those shows, which I did for years until COVID killed them, and we never did it after that. But for 3 years, we went to that show twice a year, and it was always really good because it served a double purpose for us. It signed up customers, which was great, so we got new customers. But it's like a free focus group as well, because people would come along, they'd have the demo, and they'd say, oh, well, this is great, but can it do A, B, and C? And we go, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. And we go off and make it after the show. So it could do those things. So basically, that's the story of the entire 9 years since.
Wow. But now I recall where I met you. It was in one of those shows. And I don't really go to that many shows. So that would have been about 9 years ago. So it probably been either the rubbish first showing of it or maybe not far out of it. Because I remember speaking to you, you were clearly 9 years younger, and you were like selling something. I remember thinking, actually, there's a lot of value that you're talking about here, but there's a lot of gaps that was missing. But one thing that I really liked was, which is what I still do today, and we're gonna go live and talk about how I use it, and that's your free focus group as well from a customer of 9 years or 8 years. But I remember thinking, you know what? You're solving a problem of time, which is, I don't have time to go to Zoopla, to write, to solve prices, to just go and put all of these things together. When I'm coaching people on my, so we do a lot of title split, and when I'm saying to people, you can do the hard way. You could do and go and do all of these other platforms and figure out what a one-bedroom flat in Stoke or Newham or wherever, Reading, cost, or you can use this platform. And actually, one of the biggest, quite frankly, Michael, one of the reasons why I've got you on today is I'm going to show you what I do and what I use. Then I want you to say to us who is watching this and listening to this, here's another 3 things you could do on this. Because your platform there's so much to it, right? And I'm sure different investors use it for different things. For me, it's the evaluation. The valuation module is what I really like. And I'm going to probably ask you to comment more on this in a little while. But in terms of how it fixes our problem is the time. I don't have the time. And even now my sourcing managers use that tool. When we find something, we just stack it, and I like the detail of it. And I'm going to go and actually show how I use it as well. But ultimately, I think when you are now 9 years into that journey, where you started with and fixing that problem, what do you think now you've got that is so much better than over those kind of iterations? What would you say that is?
Yeah, great question. Well, look, firstly, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there, and you've basically done my sales pitch for me, which is that this is a time saver first and foremost. And sometimes we get the feedback. People go, they go on the pricing analysis section. They can see that it's listings from portals like Rightmove and Zoopla, and they go, well, I can just do this myself on Rightmove. I can, and I, no, yeah, of course you can if you want, but it will take you 10 times as long. So that is the key value, that property data provides. Yeah. I often say, we're not a data company, we're actually a software company. So it says data in the name, but actually the value add that we provide is all those data sources. I think we got sort of 26 or something, all in one place on one system where you can access it easily, quickly. You get used to the interface. So that is there's a big part of how we sell what property data does. Is it's a time saver, and in property, if you can get to the opportunity, faster, spend less time doing it, look at more opportunities with the same amount of time, whatever, that is an absolute, it's an absolute result. And with the numbers involved with property data, the numbers involved with property, talking about spending tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds, your 30 quid a month subscription to property data, that can pay for itself very, very easily if you find a good opportunity or find an opportunity faster. You probably paid for 10 years of subscription with the first deal that you do. So, but to answer your question, the landscape has obviously changed enormously in 8 or 9 years. You're absolutely right that the system is now very complicated. What was a sort of very simple 3-week job to start with has grown and grown and grown. It's not.
It's just how a business starts, right? Great idea, get going, and then get perfect later.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you're never perfect in software, and it's an ongoing battle to add new features, try and keep it simple for people who are just joining.
Yeah.
Definitely one of the things I always say, which you sort of alluded to, is everyone uses it differently. Some people, I think they almost feel a pressure they should be using all the bits of it, but that's nonsense. We price it so cheaply that if you just find one bit of it that's useful for you, that's enough to make it useful. So you certainly don't need to use all of it.
And I can fight for that. And as I said at the start, honestly, I pride myself on not wasting money on things that I don't think adds value. That one module, which we're going to show in a little while, that one module is the only thing that I have ever used in 9 years. Okay, I've sent my team to have a look around. They've found great things, but I don't have the time. For me, it's always my go-to. So for £30, it really makes
and that's why we price it. That was the thing at the beginning, was price is not going to be a barrier here. We want to be basically the cheapest on the market. And we have 5,000 subscribers. I guarantee you there's not a single one who uses uses every tool on the website. That's not the point, so absolutely find the bit or bits that kind of make sense and are worthwhile for you in your kind of investment journey. So yes, and obviously now just in the last year or two, the landscape's changing. You're having sort of AI stuff, so we're experimenting with that, with adding sort of an AI chatbot so people can kind of interact in natural language with the data. And so we are always trying to keep up with what the latest things are, add new data sources, add the latest sort of functionality, while still keeping the core of what works. Actually, if you look at a screenshot of what I would have demoed to you, in the Excel 8 years ago, that's still there. That a lot of that stuff hasn't changed that much. So it's about preserving what works, but building on top, and adding new value on top.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, talking about data. So one of the biggest things that ultimately what builds credibility is, where's the data coming from? So I'm going to be quite specific. So for people who are listening to this, watching this, we are big in the buying blocks, the ones that in the background like mine. We're buying blocks of flats, then we carve them up onto separate leases. And when we come to doing this desktop, and this is what I like property data. So if people are saying, well, when do they fit this analysis part into it? Well, I would go and get my team and I finding about 100 deals a month. After those, then we will compress them into a kind of calculation to say which one has got the biggest discounts. Then to work out the biggest discount, we do, okay, so the block is worth £1 million. There's 10 flats in it. Right now, it's £100,000 a flat. We go then to property data and we work out, well, in that location, what is one bedroom flat worth? And property data does a very good job of basically aggregating or disaggregating that information for us in a one clear report. And then in that example, £100,000 in that area, property that might pull out and say, do you know what? On an average, it's £120,000 plus or minus 10,000. So for me and my mentees, Michael, that's the number I'm looking for. Now, there's another thing, and I'm going to ask you the data sources for this. That's why I'm prepping you up here. So when it says plus or minus 10,000 and it's £120,000 on average, there is about 10 to 15 data set that you're using to come up with this average. Can I ask you, what is the data source that you're using? I think I know the answer. I'm just asking you for the audience, is what is the data source that you're using to make sure that 120,000 plus or minus 10,000 and the data set that you use, where does that come from?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so on data sources more generally, we have a page on our website where we list all our data sources. I've said from the beginning, if anyone who's sort of selling you data or whatever says, oh, it's a secret where the data comes from, big red alarms. That's not, that is very suspicious. We are the opposite. We always transparent about where the data comes from. We try where possible to lay out, this is where it's come from. This is how we process it. This is how often we update it, so this is like I sometimes almost call it like a chain of custody for the evidence, for the data. So you can really kind of track where it's come from. So always total transparency on the data.
But on that note, Michael, I've just flagged up so that people who are watching it can actually see the data sources, because I really like that. And as part of the prep that we were doing for the property data podcast, bearing in mind I've used it for 8 years, I've never really looked at the data sources. But now I went, oh, hang on a minute, it's got it there. So actually, so for people listening and watching here, why did I use it? Because I knew that the data that Michael or the platform uses is this piece here on the left-hand side, the land registry data. And I'll explain a little while why that's important, and I'll let Michael finish around the data sources that you can see on your screen here.
Yeah, well, thank you for putting on that screen. It's really helpful. And yeah, I mean, the hope is that once people kind of learn to kind of trust us as a source for data, then you can kind of forget about what the sources are, because that's happening behind the scenes. Correct. But we certainly understand where people, when you first discover property data, you want to know, hold on a minute, where are they getting this data, and what are they doing to it? So yeah, in answer to the valuation specifically, there's obviously multiple different data sources go into that valuation. The most important one certainly is land registry transaction data. And so that is the kind of core, the most important data set that goes into that valuation, because that is the established sort of facts, what are properties selling for in this area. What we do is we go further, because the raw land registry data isn't actually that useful, because it will say this address sold for this much. Fine. Well, what do we know about that address? The land registry doesn't contain that. So we need to go off and match that with other data sets to say, right, that address is a flat, it's 600 square feet, it has 2 bedrooms, and suddenly that's a whole lot more useful, because that is telling me what is a 2-bedroom flat selling for, and price per square foot. And this is something that recurs throughout our system, and ever since we started 9 years ago. We are big believers that price per square foot is a really good way to think about property values. Of course, bedrooms matter, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, but price per square foot is our preferred sort of metric way of thinking about values. And so we take all that land registry data, we combine it with data from other government departments, we work out square footage, price per square foot, and that is the core of our valuation model. And to go one step further without making it too complicated, when you try and value a property in an area on our system, we will go and look at all the transactions. We will say, right, the transactions fall on what is technically called a normal distribution, but is known as a sort of bell curve to most people, right? So you have the sort of big bit in the middle. So that's where most things are selling. Call it £200 a square foot. Yeah. Cheap stuff selling at £100 a square foot. Expensive stuff selling at £300 a square foot. So we'll first work out that bell curve, that normal distribution, and then we'll say, right, based on what you've told us about the property, its features, its finish quality is a big one. Where will we place it on that bell curve, basically? So that is roughly speaking how our valuation process works. Of course, you don't need to know about that. That's happening behind the scenes, but just a kind of indication of how that works. So yeah, thank you. Put that on screen. This is a PDF sort of output from our valuation model. So at the top there, you've got the inputs that you have put in, kind of repeated back to you. So it's a 50 square meter flat in this postcode, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, 20th century construction, high interior finish quality, and so what the system has put all that in and said, right, 140,000 plus or minus 10,000. Below, what follows is basically evidence to back this up, right? So that this is some of the data behind the scenes that's gone into the valuation in the last 18 months. Average price per square meter for similar flats in a 0.2 mile radius was £2,745 a square meter. And there's the sort of comparables there. So this is kind of giving confidence, building confidence in that valuation by showing the comparables data that has been used. And of course, always worth scanning your eye over it and checking. An automated valuation doesn't obviously replace, let's say a valuation that you paid for from a RICS chartered surveyor. Yeah. And so scanning your eyes over it as a human and saying, oh, well, actually, maybe that comparable is an error, might help you spot any errors. But typically, we find these automated valuations and the automated comparable sets are pretty reliable and produce a pretty decent valuation, certainly in an urban area where you've got sufficient density of comparables to look at.
Yeah, and quite frankly, Michael, I couldn't agree more. I mean, as you can see, by just me flicking through the video for the screens, I'm very comfortable with this report because I understand, and I'm going to share with the listeners and yourself to get to see how I use it. So when we are assessing a deal, so we will typically go through. If I go and scroll back to the website, so we are. Here, I'd typically say, okay, I need to go and have a look at this building. And in that building, there's 8 flats in it. And I want to find out what each individual flat will be worth. So typically, what Michael's created here, there's a lot of information as we've spoken about already. But people listening here, my key bit of the usage of property data is this evaluate button. And I go to the valuations module, click on that. And it asks me quite clearly, quite very simply, is it a house or a flat, commercial, HMO, or development? And to be truthful, my strategy is very much about buying blocks of flats and then disaggregating them. So I am only interested in this bit of the module, which is the flat valuation. And as Michael said, you've got data criteria that to input. So what's the postcode? The flat is, or is it what is it? The flat in our case. When was it built? Typically, we go for about 2,000 onwards. Square meterage is really critical because you don't know that. You can't then value whether it's a 21 square meters or 78 square meters. You've got to make sure that when you are using property data, you've got that kind of information in there. Then it's self-evident, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, bathrooms, average quality. I like this because I think sometimes when we're buying some stuff, Michael, it's pretty much dire condition. And then we can also do what if we then do this and make it a very nice condition? What is the price differential that we can actually look to affect? So if somebody's new coming to property, that's quite a good, helpful way. And truth be told, and this is the honest truth here, so you get, is it 80 credit that we get per month, right?
Yes, it depends on what subscription plan you're on. You can go all the way up to unlimited, but
Okay.
80 credits per month is, I think that's the pro subscription plan, which is the sort of
The 30 pound a month.
£35 a month, second from the top, and that'd be 80 valuations a month, for example.
Fine. So what we have done here is over time I've learned. I used to do the below average or whatever entry point I was doing, and then changing that afterwards for the same flat to a high average. So I was using then 2 credits. Then over time I realized, well, actually I know what the average price is because that's the market price that somebody's trying to sell. So then I've kind of sharpened my analysis and said, you know what, I'm only going to do one evaluation for that one flat, and I'm actually going to just put it as the assumption I'm making here at the end. I'm going to do this flat up really well, that the condition is going to be a high condition. So in a way, slightly a bit like I said, I don't like to spend money when I don't need to waste money, but in the end, it was a lot more efficient for me. If you're thinking about, well, how do you put this into your analysis when you come into title split and value flats? That's how I do it. You get the criteria that Michael set out here, and then you press the value property tab. You get this report that we've just been showing. So this report is here. And then just to go back to this report, it churns out what the value that Michael's been alluding to, in this case, 140,000 plus or minus 10,000. But just to add one extra bit to this, over time, I used to rely mainly on this 140,000 plus or minus 10. But over time, I realized that actually I need to do a bit more hard work. So when I'm coaching other people as well, including in-house, we make sure, to Michael's point, we make sure we click on these views. That, Michael, is a very important aspect I think you've kept well into this data set, because I can now say, as we can see here, and by chance I picked this up, this report up, you can see here 46 square meters in this area of Kent can be £65,000 or £85,000 for roughly the same size, or it can even go up to 150,000. So it's important when people are using these type of data analytics system, they actually dive into the detail. And when you dive into the, before I click the view to show you what it is, but it's basically going through that view and say, which one do I have? Do I have one of those that looks a bit more like this £85,000 flat, which is, let's not beat around the bush, it's a bit grubby. And that's probably why it's £85,000. Or do I have one that looks like the next one, which is £150,000, and again, price area difference wise. Oh, hang on, maybe there's no photo of this one.
We can't always find an image, but
image, yes. Let's have a look at this one. Here we go. Or does it look a bit like this one, which is probably, well, it was less than a half a mile radius to the grubby one, but the price is 150, almost double the price. But the point I'm making here is, for listeners, is you've got to understand, well, which one do you have? Do you have the grubby one that's 85,000, or do you have one that looks like this, the house converted into 2 flats probably, or 3 flats, and the quality looks a little bit better than what the other one is? And I think, Michael, my feedback to you here is the fact that you've kept this kind of data set below for us to rely on is critical.
Yeah, and what you've perfectly illustrated there is what I was saying, and what I'm always encouraging people to do, which is combine the kind of automated bit and the headline number with a bit of human analysis and human intuition, because it's the machines can't recreate that yet anyway. So just going on and looking at those comparables will give you instantly a sense of which ones are closer comparables to the target property that you're looking at, and therefore you're kind of forming the valuation in your mind as soon as you kind of look through those. So I think that's a great process.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Now, my last take-home message for people listening and watching here, the other bit of the work that we do with this report, and Michael, if you can make it even fancier in the future because of what I'm about to say, that will be also helpful. Because guess what? When we get to the valuation stage of the process of a title split, so just to remind people, we buy the block on one freehold, like the one behind me, like Barrett Homes, like Crest Nicholson that they built, and then we chop them up onto separate leases. Those separate leases is what we're trying to value up in advance of the purchase, which is where property data comes into our processes, as well as now that I've bought it, I know roughly, let's go for the argument, say that my block of flats, each of them are worth 150 grand. I've got 6 of them, that's 900,000 pounds. When I come to refinance them at the end, 6 months down the line, I'm going to be using, and I do use these, and the surveyors don't really like it, but tough shit, I still use it. And I say, look, hang on a minute. This is my report. This is my analysis of what that flat is worth. Now, you can dispute it all you like, but guess what? This is being used, and I use these words, Michael, and I say, look, this is land registry driven data. This is robust data that's saying these properties actually sold on these dates at these prices. So it's a very hard place for them to then disagree. And I can tell you, after 25 years of investment and 9 years or 8 years of using property data, this works really well, because they will go home and use the same data set that you have put together here, which is how much is these flats. This flat 4, for example, in this example, flat 4, Goodwin Road, how much did that sell in what date? And they also do the same triangulation that I am doing, is clicking through these views and looking at which one looks very similar to what we've got. And that's how they come up with a fair valuation of that property after they've actually been in it and seen it. So
yeah, I mean, the funny thing is a good chunk of our users are surveyors who use exactly this. So I think it's kind of funny that if they're irritated, it might just be because they don't like having their job done for them and being told what to do. But that's it's exactly right. The data is incredibly robust, transactional land registry data, and so really, the only thing to make it better is to add that human intelligence on top.
Yes.
And that is what a surveyor will do, but it's a process that you can recreate and learn to get good at recreating yourself.
And believe me, I mean, so part of my process is I coach people over a year of how to do this. And we get very close to what a surveyor is doing. And quite frankly, the surveyor, they've got, there'll be surveyors listening to this, I know. But I'm not trying to take their job away or take their limelight away. But ultimately, if you have got enough experience, and you've got the data analytics that you've provided us, you can put 2 and 2 together. That condition, that size, those were sold at this price in that area per square meterage. Well, actually, we are in the ballpark. And over time, 25 years of doing this, but at least 10 years with property data, 8 to 10 years with property data, it works really well. So I think, and then just to follow on, just to finish off for people who are watching this, is the property data also then goes on to say, well, the average asking price for a, in this case, 2-bedroom flat in that area was £927. So really, it's not only giving you a data point about the valuation of the actual property, 140,000 plus or minus, but it also gives us in advance roughly what our price for the rentals could look like. And the third element we use this report in the future is for tenant rental increases. Because we are then also saying, well, okay, so dear so-and-so, we've just bought this block, there's 10 flats in there. You are right now paying £600, but the rental valuation, roughly speaking, should be around £750 a month. Here is all our data set. It's then been quite transparent with tenants as well to say, look, here is where you need to be. This is where you are. And let's have a negotiation about how we get you close to that market rate.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and that's absolutely right. I mean, the most common thing that people use property data for is part of the acquisition of property, and that's why we kind of built our what we call our three-stage workflow: research, source, evaluate. Is about sort of researching areas, sourcing properties, and then evaluating them. So we built the workflow around the acquisition of property because that's the most common thing people use it for.
Yep.
But there are loads of other reasons people use property data, and rent reviews is a great example. And one of the things that we've worked really hard to do over 9 years is to try and build a trusted, independent brand. So, we don't, our valuations are as we see it. There's no incentive to make them high or low. They're as we see it. And I think, with rent, the vast majority of landlords, despite what the newspapers might want people to believe, they just want to charge a fair rent. And so we can say what a fair rent is. And, that leads to a rent increase. Then we can kind of evidence that in this sort of impartial way, and I think tenants are more likely to be understanding of a kind of report that says, look, here are the average rents in the area, than just feeling like, oh, the landlord's whacking the rent up 7%.
Just your finger in the air, kind of like working out what you. Apps couldn't agree more, and that process really works well for us because my property managers would then literally we buy all over the country, so it's not like the local knowledge of that area. Well, you could be in the southeast or southwest or northeast or northwest, and we're not expert in local areas in every part of the country. So this over time has become a very big crutch for us to rely on to make the right decisions with tenants and tenant rent increases. So thank you. I guess is probably the time to say, it's a really good thing you've created. But before we go, I want to ask you a few kind of snappy questions where you can say, okay, yeah, this, that, and the other. So if obviously you know this intimately, so what would you say the top 5 features for investors are on the platform that you've built that maybe I'm not using, and maybe then we could have a look at. So, and then you could just guide me. I can also show people on the platform on this as well.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, look, that's a how long do you have question, because when I give demos of property data, I have 20-minute demos, 40-minute demos, 60-minute demos. So you can spend, you can go a long time. So I don't know that we have the time to.
I'm going to say you've got 1 minute to tell me 5 top tips or 5 bits that you think, actually, you can have a look at this. People should have a look at this because of that.
Well, look, each of these is a tool that you can spend an hour in. But look, in the research section, you've got the local data tool. That is the core of the website. That's the thing we built first 9 years ago. So that is, go back to my friend and his buy-to-let. That is, you draw an area and it gives you a dashboard of data for that area. And there's just tons of stuff in there. So that's a when you're at the research phase, when you're working out, do I want to invest in this area? That is the tool to go to. Okay. We've got our sourcing tools. I love our on-market sourcing tool in the middle. So you click that on the left there, the on-market sourcing tool. We've got 36 different strategies in there. Things
so
like
this is sucking data from Rightmove, Zoopla.
But this is the ultimate demonstration of the time saver bit. So these are all properties that are on Rightmove and Zoopla and on the market. We do have those off-market sourcing tools if people are more interested in that approach. But if it were me, actually, I'd stick to the on-market, and it's just about getting alerts set up. So instead of having to sift through hundreds of properties, I mean, there's at any one time, there are about 1 million properties on Rightmove. Okay, so there's a lot of properties out there. Obviously, less in the area that you're interested in. But that's a fairly small list, the unbroken freehold. So you might want to start with a postcode and get a sort of bigger radius up.
Yeah.
But so all the different strategies. This strategy we've only added about 3 weeks ago, so we are still finessing this. But you will see sort of blocks of apartments, self-contained flats coming up there. So other strategies like unmodernized properties or properties for cash buyers only work really well. And how it works, you say, this is the area I'm interested in, set me up an alert. So the minute an unmodernized property comes to the market, ping me an email. And the system will do that for you. So that I think is really powerful and what a lot of people use it for. And then the last thing I would say, I know this is 3, not 5, but thinking of time, in the evaluate section, you've got the plot map. Now, I don't know how much you've...
I haven't done that, actually, so tell me about that.
Okay, so the plot map is basically all our kind of data for individual. This is great it's great for snooping at your neighbours, to be honest, but it's also great for checking out an investment property and the properties around it. So you stick in a full postcode anywhere in England, and you get then the physical boundaries, the ownership lines, planning permissions. So if
Oh
you look,
yes, I have seen this actually. Apologies. Because see, planning permission. It says it has a little signs on each of them, right? Just yeah, there we go.
yeah. So as you the ownership lines are just loading up now. They've loaded. So you move your mouse around, you see the actual ownership lines. You hover over a building, and look at that on the right there. You get all the information we have about
Wow.
that property in terms of sale history, council tax rates, energy scores, all this kind of stuff. Who owns it? So that's a commercial
So,
piece.
so, so here, there's a lot of data here. So what are we
There's
missing?
yeah.
That what? Why? Who's using this level of data? Are they investors? Are they more like yeah? Who's because
I mean, the plot map tool is arguably maybe a little bit developer focused in that it has, if you look on the left, it has things like
who owns it and buys the? Oh, okay.
ownership,
Yep.
so that's an interesting one. That's owned by the mayor of London, whatever that is. I guess it's just a piece of road.
Uh,
But, it's quite interesting. So this has got planning stuff, development constraints, so things like conservation areas, Article 4, AONBs, outer London, national parks. So there's quite a lot of features that are more developer focused,
yeah.
but also just a regular investor looking to buy something and just almost doing due diligence on what planning applications are going in nearby. Planning applications could be a positive and a negative, can't they?
Of course.
So certain ones may be viewed negative, and this is a good example again of a time saver. You could go to Redbridge Local Authority website and look at their planning tool, but it's probably a bit slow and clunky and whatever. We have all the planning applications for the whole country going back 10 years in this interface right here.
So can I ask you something here? So, for
Yeah,
example, we're buying a block of flats, and actually, you might be solving another problem of ours here. So, we need to know whether this block of 8 flats has got planning permission. You're saying we could go to this section and find the block, hover on it, and it should have a PP on it or something.
yeah,
And if we click on the PP, planning permission, it will bring us something like this. And
yeah.
then we can then click onto more information and go to that planning portal.
Yeah, that's exactly
Oh, there we
how it
go.
works.
As if I'd planned this in advance, right? So that's a really good. Okay, so because I think that's. Oh, hang on.
They got a cookie pop up.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah. So that I think is actually I've just learned something massively important for me because what we normally tend to do is find the block, go to the planning portal, and go and look for all this information there. You've actually got it here. Now, is that a credit debiting activity?
I love your focus on the credit
On
strategy.
the 80
Might be
credits.
you might be a candidate for the unlimited account, which has you don't need to worry about credits anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
But yes, so the plot map search uses a credit. So not clicking onto a planning permission or anything like that, but that one where you typed in the postcode, you got that map, you can then move around, and that doesn't and look at all the properties you want that doesn't use an extra credit, but just that one search uses a credit.
Gotcha. Oh, I see. So once you arrive at the postcode,
Yeah. Once you're on this
whatever
map,
you do in it doesn't matter.
correct. Yeah.
I see.
You
Amazing.
actually, whenever you see that loading screen, basically is when a credit is going to be charged. So if you go back again, but yeah, that's the sort of hint is basically, basically you're using a credit to do that.
I've got you. I've got you.
But so in the course of this demo, you basically just use 2 credits, like one for the valuation, one for the plot map.
Yeah.
I mean, look, when it comes to the plans, we always say if you go to the about menu and click plans, just so that people can see, or pricing, sorry, top of that
Pricing,
left hand column. So really, what I always say to people here is just start on the standard plan.
Yeah.
The basic plan is quite limited, and you can run out those credits quite quickly. It's 20 credits a month. The standard plan's a lot more. And one of the things that we've believed in right from the beginning, there's no contracts, there's no secret lock-in. It's not like you have to commit to 12 months or 24 months or, pay all up front. You can, if you want, pay up front for a year, but most 92% of customers pay monthly, and it's monthly rolling. You can upgrade at any time, downgrade at any time, cancel at any time. So start on that standard plan for most people, £22 a month. If you find you're hitting some limit, you can upgrade. It sounds like you're on the pro plan, which would be 80 credits a month. And then, the sort of hardcore of users, about 20% of the users are on the unlimited plan. So you don't need to worry about credits anymore. You don't need to worry about anything. Everything's unlimited.
Yeah. No, I think what I also like about, I've just seen here branded PDF as well. There's so much more. We might have to off channel talk about some of the additional benefits that we might get if we are going from maybe pro to unlimited. I think 8 years later, maybe it requires a bit of a jump in our subscription. But for me, I am just going to start to wrap this up and just to say to people who are watching this or listening to this, this is a tool that I've used for 8 years and I still do it today. In fact, I did 3 this morning, and my sourcing manager in-house uses this as well as all the mentees as part. And Michael, you know this because I'd send them a link to say, can you use this link? So would you be able to give us a link after this so we can add it into the show notes and get people to then go to that show note and click the link and then take them here to sign up to Property Data?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, you've got your link that you can put there. I mean,
I'll just add that on.
Just add that on, and we can. I'm always happy to give a discount code. We don't give a discount. We basically never give ongoing discounts because our thing is that we're already the cheapest on the market. You know, in our view, these are really cheap prices for what what the system offers. Yep. But we do give a one-off 50% off for the first month after the trial. So everyone gets a 14-day free trial, completely free, no commitment. I'm very happy.
That link that I'm going to send in the show note, when they join, they'll still get that 50% off straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's a code. There's a code for there'll need to be a code for the 50% off. I can't remember if I've ever given you one before.
You might have to just email me that code so that I can get these.
I'll email you that. 50% off first month, then full price after that. But as I say, there's no contract. It's monthly rolling. You can cancel at any time. So there's minimal commitment.
I don't say that about a lot of things. I think the value being provided by even just that one tab, valuation. Honestly, for me, and by the way, Michael, can you say that I am not getting paid to say this, by the way? So this is generally, and on my podcast, I'm only interviewing people that either I use myself, the lawyers, the brokers, and the tax advisors, whoever, your platform. I'm only actually promoting things that I genuinely use myself, and I think is actually worth looking into. So if people want to find out more, they can go to the show notes, they can click that link and get the registration or the subscription, and thank you for the 50% off for the first month. Try it out and see what we've been talking about today. But honestly, it's the time saver, and the accuracy is also important because of the land registry effect that we get with this platform. So last bits of plug-in. Do you have anything else to say about to the audience? Is there anything else you want to add before we start to wrap this up?
Well, one tiny thing to mention is our browser extension. I don't know if you have that installed, Azid. That's a really handy little tool. Okay. So that basically just brings that data right into Rightmove or Zoopla. So when you're on you have to use Google Chrome as your browser for that, and it just is a little extension. So if you go in the research menu at the top there, and click browser extension, it's just a little picture there of what it does. But basically, it means that when you're on Rightmove looking at a property, boom, on the right there, you get headline information, not nearly the depth that you've just looked at for, in evaluation, but you get that average asking price, average price per square foot, price history for the property, things like that. So that is a really handy thing to have installed. It looks like you're not on Google Chrome, but you can always use switch.
I'm not, but I might have to start to maybe transition to Google Chrome just to have that extra bit of information.
It's just what browser are you using here?
I think Safari.
We did used to have a Safari extension, but Apple cracked down on something. I can't remember what it was. Something that they did that meant it didn't work anymore. So Chrome has always been the best for extensions, and they can be quite powerful, and ours is just a neat way of adding extra information onto the side of portal listings.
Amazing. Right, before we close, Michael, I'm going to show you one more thing that we've built, but that I think we probably could actually have a look at how we can work together on an API on our calculator, and I'll show you that now, and then maybe you have that conversation. Maybe you have to think about whether that is something that we can either API your property data onto it or vice versa, and then my developers can actually have that. I don't really know enough about it to tell you the details of it, but I'll show you it, and then you can say, you know what, that might be something that we'd be interested in or not. So here is a deal calculator. Now I've done this for 25 years, and a bit like your Excel conversation you had at the start, that's exactly what I had. I was like, okay, so if I'm buying a block, how much am I paying for it? How much is it going to cost me to do it up? What kind of legal costs, stamp duty, blah, 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 all the costs that it needs to be. And then at the end, I get, well, how much money can I take out at the end of that process on my title split, can I refinance all my money out? First element. And the second element is how much rent am I going to make passive net income at the end? And to do that, I started with the Excel spreadsheet. It was about 75 rows long. And over time, then we built this. And I said to my guys, I said, we've got to get better at this, because not only for my own sanity, but for other people, to teach them something, it has to be quite intuitive. So we built this. And you can see here, there's a dashboard that we're adding more and more a suite to it. So title split calculator is what I'm going to show you in a minute, but we've got the profitability calculator, schedule of works calculator. We're adding more things as we go along. On top of that, we've got the, obviously, the podcast, and it's got all the links and bits. But I just want to show you this calculator, because I think one of my guys was saying, look, I think we need to probably integrate property data on here as a module where people can be doing this and then click property data to get this valuation, for example. So just to go through, it's 5 steps. We asked the users to use the property details on here. Then they've got the seller's view. So how much are they paying for this thing? And then it works out. Let me load up a calculation to show it better. So in this case, there's the property link, the address, the number of flats, the sizes of the flats. Now, we use a lot of EPC register. Do you have something like that on your platform?
Yeah, we certainly do. We got the full EPC register just for pulling off. It's in that valuation tool you were showing. Actually, there's a little magnifying glass. You just click the little magnifying glass, and you can search the EPC register to get the square meterage.
So that would be that again. That's another thing I've just learned here that will shortcut, because otherwise we have to go to EPC register, put the postcode, blah blah blah. So then we get this, and then we start to put the information around the calculation. So how much on the left hand side, how much the seller wants for it. What the buyer's assessment in the middle part is, well, how much are we spending on this to get it from condition A to condition B? Financing is another module that we work through, and it works out for us, well, how much money is going to cost us to buy the place. The rental income, we have a switch on yearly, monthly, and then it gives us this result, because this is what ultimately I and mentees and everybody else wants to know. How much on the left-hand side, the new value created is how much did we buy it, how much is it now worth, and what's the value that we created, which in this case is 128,000 above what we paid and spent. The refinance is how much money we pull out. And the passive income bit is at the end, it says, okay, well, you're going to make, after you take all your money out, a profit of around £1,300 per month on that block. And it ends with this, it'll be like a highlight, which is where I go for when somebody sends me this. I say, okay, well, if you buy this deal, you'll take 128 grand. You've added a value, 128,000, taken out all your money plus 5,806 pounds out, and 1,350 pounds on top. So this is what, excuse me, this is what I've kind of we've been using, and our mentees and people are now buying on to kind of get them that property data experience, but on a title split, assessing a block of flats with knowledge of around 25 years putting together. One of the comments that I've got then for you, there is a question here, is how can we integrate, and is there somewhere where we can integrate something like property data where the user's using it and says, you know what, I don't know about, for example, the EPC. So click this, get the EPC. I don't know what the valuation, which is where we get your evaluate valuation. When we come to here, we say, okay, well, what is the block valuation? Or guess what? What is the new valuation of the individual flat? If there's 5 flats, you can then. So part of today was a case of, can we do something like this with from an API perspective with property data to make it that much more easy?
Yeah. So firstly, that is a fantastic looking calculator. I love it. And it's a good example of something, we have a few very simple calculators, but we would never go this deep into one strategy like title splitting, and we don't have the 25 years of expertise. So it's a fantastic calculator. But yes, populating or helping to populate little parts of that from our data is absolutely the whole point of the API. And so for people who don't know, an API is a way for 2 bits of software to talk to each other behind the scenes. So absolutely you would need to speak to your software developers, but it's totally possible for behind the scenes, people using the data that users enter into this calculator. Your software can nip off to property data and say, give me a valuation on that, give me the list of EPC areas for this postcode, whatever. That's all behind the scenes. And our API is really the best in the UK in terms of, we've got sort of 61 different endpoints, which are different ways that people can access the data through the API. And it's interesting. Look, it was always about 8% of our revenue. So about 92% of our revenue came from people using our website, and about 8% from the API. But in the last year or two, with AI and stuff like that, the interest in the API has gone off the charts, and it's probably doubled as a percentage of our revenue, which of course has meant that we're spending a bit more time on it, and because it was always second consideration when it came to making new features and stuff like that. But now we're spending a lot more time kind of brushing it up and making it more useful. And absolutely, it's absolutely perfect use case for you to use
Amazing.
our API to extract our data into your calculator.
Connect you with some of my guys then to say, look, let's have a conversation offline to say, how can we make the experience? Because ultimately they're going to end up on property data, but whether they go through here and then end up with property data is what we're trying to say here. Well, do they need to go and 10 different places to go and do this search, or can they just do it on this calculator using the API with property data to populate this? So I think that you've answered my question very clearly. So thank you so much for that. And on that note, I just want to wrap up to say, look, it's a Friday afternoon, and I know we've been trying to kind of get you into the studio in Shoreditch, but family commitment and travel is always a bit of a problem. But actually, we found when there's a will, there's a way, and actually when the tools and the service is so good, I wanted to make sure that we don't end the whole year again not having got you on. So thank you for taking the time to giving us all the information that you've given us, and also just creating something that genuinely, people seem that I'm a sales rep for property data. I'm not. I promise you, I don't work for them. But honestly, it's a very simple, easy tool, and I'm sure there's loads of other tools out there that, quite frankly, I've never looked at, but it does what it needs to do for us, and we keep recommending it. And Michael, on that note, thank you so much for being so helpful, and I look forward to obviously working with you on all the stuff that has to come along.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, Azza, thank you very much for having me on the podcast. Always appreciate an invitation like this, and there is no better salesman than an enthusiastic user of a piece of software. So you have done my work for me today with your enthusiasm. But it's always nice to hear from someone who has, been one of our customers since the early days, and genuinely finds it useful and understands the value add. So thank you.
Good man. Well, listen, have a good weekend, and no doubt we will be in touch with you to start talking about some of the other projects that we've got to get.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye bye.
So I hope you've enjoyed this episode with Michael from Property Data, and I hope you've actually taken some information about how we are using these data analytics software to be able to help us make decisions on entry before even buying a block, how we assess them. Property Data has helped me personally for the last 8 years, and I'm delighted to be sharing that information with you, and I hope you take some actions following this. You can click the link below, find out how you can get a 50% discount on entry with Property Data, and try this out for at least the first month, and thereafter you can decide. As Michael says, this is not a yearly contract, it's a monthly. You can roll on and off. But on that note, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.